In the cold silence of space, a ship drifted among the stars. It was a sleek vessel, its hull a shimmering dark metal that seemed to absorb the light around it. This was not a ship for diplomacy, not one meant for peaceful talks. It was an instrument of war sent from the heart of the Galactic Empire. Its mission was clear and unforgiving: eliminate the human child. On Earth, in a small, quiet town far from the chaos of political struggles, a child named Leo sat by a window, watching the sunset. He was no ordinary child, but to him, the world outside his window seemed peaceful. His life, full of simple joys, was about to be shattered. He did not know it yet, but his existence had become a threat that would ignite the fury of an entire planet. The Galactic Empire had been watching Earth for decades, quietly observing from the shadows. They had studied humanity, analyzed its strengths, and found its weaknesses. They had discovered Leo by accident, a young boy with a rare and powerful genetic anomaly that, if harnessed, could change the balance of power across the galaxy. A child with abilities that no one truly understood. And that, to the Empire, made him a liability. To protect their dominance, they decided that Leo must be eliminated. The plan was simple: a small, covert operation to take the child from his home, erase all evidence of his existence, and leave no trace. The Empire's agents had come with quiet precision, moving in the dead of night. They had watched Leo for days, making sure they knew his every move, every routine. But there was a flaw in their plan, a mistake that would alter everything. Leo's mother, a loving woman with no knowledge of the greater galaxy beyond Earth, had noticed something strange in the air. She had sensed the presence of strangers, lurking too close, the feeling of eyes watching her family. But by the time she realized the danger, it was already too late. The agents struck with brutal efficiency, but they did not account for the mother's protective instincts. As Leo was pulled from his room, his mother fought back. She was not a warrior, but she was desperate. The agents had underestimated her. In the chaos, the child was taken, but so was something else, the rage that would soon awaken across Earth. The agents, in their haste to complete their mission, had made a fatal error. They did not leave quickly enough. They did not hide their tracks well enough. And that was their downfall. The Empire's plan to erase Leo had failed. The mother, heartbroken but alive, sent out a silent cry for help, a call to anyone who might hear it, a desperate message to the world that her son was taken. Her grief, her loss, became the spark that lit the fire. Across Earth, people began to hear of the attack, of the child who was stolen. News spread like wildfire. A mother's sorrow turned into a rallying cry. The death of one human child was enough to ignite a flame of fury that no one in the Empire had expected. The reaction was swift and fierce. People around the world from every nation and background began to unite in their anger. This was not just the tragedy of one family, it was a tragedy for all of humanity. And though no one knew exactly what had happened, they knew one thing for sure. The Galactic Empire had made a fatal mistake. The Empire had underestimated humanity's strength, its ability to rise when provoked. They had assumed that Earth, divided and fractured, would be incapable of standing against the might of the galactic forces. But they were wrong. The mistake of taking Leo, the mistake of underestimating a mother's love, would become the catalyst for a movement that would shake the very foundation of the Empire. As whispers of rebellion began to spread, leaders from all corners of Earth began to take action. People, once disconnected from one another, found themselves coming together, driven by a single cause: to bring the child home and to exact vengeance on those who dared to take him. The Galactic Empire had made an error that would cost them dearly. The Earth had awoken, and it would never be the same again. In the shadowed halls of the Empire, a fleet commander watched the news feed. His face was grim as he understood the full extent of the consequences of their actions. The mistake had been made, and now there was no turning back. What the Empire had hoped to suppress had only just begun. The first ripple of rebellion had been cast, and soon, Earth's fury would be unleashed upon the stars themselves. The agents who had been sent to eliminate Leo had failed, but their failure was not just their own. It would set into motion a chain of events that no one could predict, and the cost of this mistake would soon be felt across the galaxy. The Galactic Empire had underestimated humanity, and now they would pay the price. Earth was awake, and its rage was only beginning to build. The days following Leo's abduction were chaotic, filled with fear and anger. What had once been a quiet, ordinary planet had transformed overnight. People from every corner of Earth, bound together by the tragedy of one child, began to rise. The collective fury that pulsed through the global populace was unlike anything the Galactic Empire could have imagined. The world had awakened to a shared purpose. It started as a whisper, a murmur among the crowds. In cities, in villages, across continents, there were rumors of a great injustice, a powerful child taken by strangers from beyond the stars. But as the stories spread, so did the anger. People who had never thought twice about the distant cosmos now found themselves looking up at the sky with suspicion and hatred. The Earth they knew was no longer the same. The child's death was the catalyst that sparked the planet's first unified response to an alien power that had long been watching them. In capitals and smaller towns alike, governments were forced to act. Public outcry was overwhelming, and political leaders, once divided over petty disagreements, now found themselves pushed into action by the sheer force of the people's will. Earth had no army that could match the might of the Galactic Empire, but it had something more powerful: unity. People began to come together not out of fear, but out of defiance. The child's death was no longer just a tragedy. It was a rallying cry that would unite the planet in ways no one had ever anticipated. Across the world, governments started to rally their forces. Military organizations that had once been divided by borders and ideologies now shared a common enemy. The first steps toward a unified Earth military took place in the dead of night, when the world's leaders signed the treaty that would make them allies, all for one purpose: revenge. The fate of the Galactic Empire was sealed in that moment. Earth would not be crushed easily. It was not only governments that took action. Ordinary civilians, enraged by the story of Leo, began to organize on their own. Hackers infiltrated the Galactic Empire's communications, sending messages of defiance and warning across the galaxy. Citizens in every nation joined underground. Resistance groups, training in secret, preparing for the moment when they would face their oppressors. Earth's people were determined to fight back, and no one was exempt from the fight. The resistance did not care about national borders. It cared only about the freedom of humanity. The technology of Earth, once considered primitive in comparison to the vast advanced machinery of the Empire, was being rapidly upgraded. Scientists, engineers, and technicians from all over the planet gathered to develop new weapons and strategies. They worked around the clock, determined to match the Empire's technological superiority. While the world's most powerful weapons of mass destruction were stockpiled in secrecy, Earth's greatest strength was its creativity. It was a planet that had never seen true war until now, and in the crucible of this new threat, it was forging a powerful new identity. Within months, the global resistance was no longer a whisper. It was a roaring wave, growing in strength and resolve. Earth's population, once fractured and weak, was now bound by a common goal: the destruction of the Galactic Empire. And at the heart of it all was the child, Leo, whose death had been the spark for this unprecedented unity. The Galactic Empire, however, remained unaware of the full extent of Earth's rising fury. From their high command, distant leaders watched the planet with disdain, still believing that they had nothing to fear. They had wiped out countless worlds, and humanity seemed insignificant, a mere speck in the universe. But as Earth's military power grew, the Empire began to notice something unsettling: human ingenuity. On the surface, Earth's forces seemed like a disorganized, mismatched collection of people and resources. But beneath the surface, the Resistance was developing tactics and technologies that were unpredictable, even to the Empire. The first battles between Earth's forces and the Empire's elite soldiers were fierce and bloody. The humans fought, with a desperation born of loss, a force more powerful than any advanced weapon. Earth was no longer the helpless planet the Empire had assumed it to be. In the midst of this growing conflict, Earth's leaders made a decision. They would send a message to the Empire, one that would shake them to their core. Earth's greatest. Scientists and engineers had created a weapon that would change the course of the war. It was not just a new type of spacecraft, nor a new kind of weapon. It was something far more dangerous, a prototype capable of harnessing the energy of a dying star, powerful enough to obliterate entire fleets. It was Earth's first real weapon against the Empire, and it would be used as a symbol of their defiance. As the weapon neared completion, the people of Earth gathered in their millions. They had not forgotten Leo. They had not forgotten the rage that had filled them the moment they had learned of his death. Now, they would send their fury straight to the heart of the Galactic Empire. But while the Earth was preparing its vengeance, a darker truth began to emerge. A series of mysterious transmissions, intercepted by the Resistance, revealed that the Galactic Empire had not been entirely truthful about their intentions. The child, Leo, had not just been a threat. There were greater forces at play, a deeper conspiracy that tied Leo's death to a far larger plan, a plan that Earth could not yet fully comprehend. As the Earth's forces prepared for their first major assault, they knew that the battle would not be just for revenge. It was a battle for their survival, for the future of their planet. And as they looked toward the stars, one question haunted them. Would their anger be enough to overcome the seemingly insurmountable might of the Galactic Empire? The Galactic Empire had underestimated Earth in every way imaginable. They had thought their superior technology, their vast fleets, and their centuries of experience in galactic conquest would be enough to crush this insignificant planet. They had failed to recognize something far more dangerous: the human spirit. Earth was not just fighting to defend its existence. It was fighting for its very soul. The first sign that the Empire had made a grave mistake came when they attempted to deploy their fleet to Earth's orbit. They thought they could intimidate the growing Resistance with sheer numbers. The Galactic Empire's flagship, the Dominion, led a full armada of warships to the edge of Earth's atmosphere. The Empire had no doubts. The destruction of Earth's cities would be quick and absolute. After all, the Resistance had nothing to compare to their military might, but Earth was no longer the helpless planet it once had been. The people of Earth, working tirelessly behind the scenes, had prepared for this moment. Earth's first line of defense was not the primitive weapons the Empire thought they would rely on. It was the new weapon they had developed in secret, the Helios cannon, a weapon capable of channeling the energy of a dying star into a focused beam of destructive power. It was humanity's first answer to the Empire's overwhelming might. As the Dominion and its fleet entered Earth's orbit, the Resistance took their first step into the galaxy's most dangerous game. They had set their trap, and the moment was finally here. The Helios cannon was ready. With a command from Earth's highest military authority, the weapon was fired. The blast, intense and searing, shot into the void of space, a brilliant burst of light that tore through the Dominion's lead ship with devastating force. The Empire's flagship was reduced to a smoldering wreck in seconds. The remaining fleet, in shock, struggled to recover, but they were too late. The weapon had proven its power. Earth had dealt the first blow. The Empire's response was immediate and brutal. They called upon their elite soldiers, the Legion of Obsidian, known throughout the galaxy for their ruthlessness and efficiency. These warriors were among the best the Empire had to offer, trained from birth to be the perfect soldiers, capable of destroying entire planets with ease. They descended upon Earth's major cities, launching swift, targeted strikes in an attempt to crush the resistance before it could grow any stronger. But the Earthlings, prepared for such a move, fought back with surprising determination. The battlefields were unlike any the Empire had ever seen. Human soldiers, though outmatched in terms of technology and training, fought with something the Empire's forces lacked: passion. The resistance, though small in numbers, was relentless. They fought not just for victory, but for the future of their world. And as the days turned into weeks, the Empire began to realize that their initial assessment of Earth was deeply flawed. The Legion of Obsidian proved ineffective against Earth's unpredictable tactics. The Resistance had adopted guerrilla warfare, blending into the environment, striking swiftly, and then disappearing into the shadows. The Empire's soldiers, accustomed to fighting organized armies on planets that bowed to their will, were ill-prepared for the human spirit and their unyielding desire to protect their home. The Empire's next move was even more drastic. They began to deploy their most advanced technologies, drones, artificial intelligences, and bioengineered soldiers, hoping to gain the upper hand. They thought that by flooding the planet with automated forces, they could overwhelm the resistance. But the humans had anticipated this as well. They had developed their own countermeasures, hacking into the Empire's systems, turning their own technology against them. The drones, once a symbol of the Empire's superiority, were now falling from the sky, useless against the very people they were meant to subjugate. The battle for Earth was becoming more and more complex. The Empire, in desperation, began to target civilian areas. Entire cities were bombed, and innocent lives were lost in the crossfire. But the more the Empire pushed, the more Earth's people pushed back. Every destruction, every loss, only fueled their rage. The Resistance was no longer just a military force, it had become a movement. People from all walks of life, once strangers to one another, were now bound by the same purpose. Earth would not fall. As the war raged on, the tension between the Empire's leaders grew. The loss of their flagship and the inability to subdue Earth's forces sent shockwaves through the Galactic Empire. In private chambers, high-ranking officials began to question the wisdom of their decisions. Were they underestimating Earth too much? Should they have ignored the planet entirely, or had they simply made too many mistakes? One voice, however, stood above the others. Admiral Orval, the Empire's most experienced strategist, had been tasked with overseeing the campaign against Earth. He had not been surprised by the Resistance's tenacity. His years of military experience had taught him to never underestimate an enemy, but the other commanders were growing impatient. They wanted a quick victory, and they were losing faith in Orval's strategy. In a tense meeting, Orval tried to explain the complexity of Earth's response. He spoke of human resilience, their ability to adapt and fight against impossible odds. He urged his fellow commanders not to rush to a final assault, warning that it would lead to disastrous consequences. But the pressure was mounting. The Empire's pride was at stake, and their leaders could not afford to lose to a planet they had considered insignificant. Behind closed doors, a darker conversation unfolded. The Galactic Empire had one last weapon they were ready to deploy. It was a weapon so destructive, so terrifying, that it had been kept in reserve for the most dire of situations. And now, Earth was on the verge of facing it. The Empire's decision had been made. They would deploy the Oblivion Cannon, a weapon capable of annihilating entire continents in a single blast. Earth had struck the first blow, but the Empire had one final strike to make. The stage was set for an even greater conflict. As Earth's forces prepared for the next phase of the war, they had no idea just how much more they would have to sacrifice. The true scale of the Empire's wrath was about to be unleashed, and the fate of humanity would be determined by their willingness to fight until the very end. The people of Earth had no idea what awaited them. After months of intense struggle, victories and losses alike, they had forged a strength that no one had thought possible. But as the Empire unleashed its ultimate weapon, the Oblivion Cannon, all that had been built, every sacrifice, every ounce of hope, was about to face its greatest test. The Oblivion Cannon was a terrifying piece of technology, a colossal superweapon, capable of destroying entire continents with a single shot. It had been hidden in the deepest reaches of the galaxy, kept as a last resort weapon to remind any planet, no matter how brave, that the Empire was invincible. The moment it was deployed, Earth's resistance had no choice but to prepare for the worst. No one could predict how devastating the weapon would be, but all knew one thing: humanity's survival was now in jeopardy. The first signs of the Oblivion Cannon appeared when the skies above Earth darkened. The fleet had arrived in full force. Massive ships filled the atmosphere, each carrying the deadly weapon, ready to strike down entire cities. Earth's military knew they had little time to react. This was no longer a fight of tactics. It was a fight for survival. The only hope lay in destroying the weapon before it could fire its destructive blast. But even as the resistance scrambled to prepare their defenses, they realized just how much they had underestimated the might of the Empire. The Oblivion Cannon was protected by layers of force fields, impenetrable shields that could deflect any attack. Earth's most powerful weapons had already been tested on the Empire's ships, and none had been able to break through. The Helios cannon, their shining hope, had been silenced after the first strike. Now, the only way to survive was to take the fight to the source of the weapon itself. With Earth's hope hanging by a thread, a daring mission was launched. A small team of Earth's elite soldiers, chosen not for their training but for their courage, was sent to infiltrate the Empire's flagship. The mission was simple: disable the Oblivion Cannon before it could fire, or all was lost. But as the resistance moved deeper into enemy territory, they were met with challenges that no one had anticipated. The Empire's forces were everywhere, its soldiers relentless. The fleet had become a labyrinth, and every corner seemed to hide an enemy force waiting to strike. The resistance was running out of time, and the odds were turning against them. Back on Earth, the global response was nothing short of a miracle. As the threat of annihilation loomed over them, entire cities were evacuated and citizens mobilized to fight. For the first time, people who had once lived in the shadows of fear and oppression stood together as one. They knew that to survive, they would have to fight like never before. It was no longer just about revenge. It was about saving their home, their families, their future. As the battle raged on in space, Earth's forces took to the skies in their own desperate assault. Armed with makeshift weapons and stolen alien technology, they launched counterattacks against the Empire's fleet, hoping to buy enough time for the infiltration team to reach the Oblivion Cannon. Every attack was met with overwhelming force, but each small victory served as a reminder of Earth's resilience. Even when it seemed like the resistance would be overwhelmed, humanity's resolve only grew stronger. The Empire's fleets, though, superior in firepower, began to show signs of strain. Earth's forces were adapting faster than the Empire had anticipated, and their attacks were beginning to make an impact. In the heart of the Empire's flagship, the team sent to disable, the Oblivion Cannon had reached their objective. The weapon itself was a sight to behold, massive, almost otherworldly in its design, pulsing with energy. But as they moved in to plant the explosives, they were ambushed. The team fought fiercely, but it became clear that they would not be able to complete their mission without help. They sent out a distress signal, hoping that Earth's forces would find a way to reach them in time. Back on Earth, the Resistance knew that the fate of their world was in the hands of those fighting in space. If the Oblivion cannon was allowed to fire, Earth would be reduced to nothing. And yet, despite the overwhelming odds, humanity refused to give up. The leaders of the Resistance, military commanders, scientists, engineers, were in constant communication, making plans for a final push. They had no choice but to fight. It was a battle for their survival, and they could not afford to lose. The final moments of the battle were nothing short of chaos. As Earth's forces pressed forward, the Empire's command structure began to falter. The Oblivion cannon was ready to fire, but the weapon's energy systems began to flicker. Something was wrong. The team on the flagship had successfully sabotaged the weapon's core. It was a race against time. If they couldn't disable the cannon's backup systems, Earth would be obliterated in mere moments. And then, just as it seemed the cannon would fire, a flash of light illuminated the sky. The team had succeeded. The Oblivion cannon exploded in a violent burst of energy, its power turned against itself. Earth's forces, now united, pushed forward, dealing the final blow to the Empire's fleet. In that moment, the Resistance had won. The Oblivion cannon was no more, and the Empire's stranglehold on Earth had been broken. But victory came at a great cost. The damage to Earth's cities was catastrophic, and the loss of life was immense. The Resistance had fought with everything they had, and they had won. But it was clear that the battle was far from over. The Galactic Empire would not easily forgive this defeat, and the fight for Earth's survival was only beginning. Yet, in that moment of triumph, Earth stood proud, knowing that they had shown the galaxy the true power of humanity. And with that, they began the long road to recovery, united, stronger, and more determined than ever. The rage that had been unleashed would forever echo through the stars. The Empire had underestimated Earth before, but they would not make the same mistake again. The explosion of the Oblivion cannon had sent shockwaves across the galaxy, but the Galactic Empire was not one to accept defeat quietly. They regrouped, recalibrated, and prepared for their final assault on the planet that had dared to defy them. The battle for Earth was far from over, and what came next would test every ounce of human strength. In the aftermath of the Oblivion cannon's destruction, Earth's resistance was battered, but not broken. The victory, though monumental, came at an immense cost. Cities lay in ruins, and the scars of war were visible on every continent. Yet amid the devastation, something remarkable was happening. The people of Earth, once divided by borders and ideologies, had been forged into something new. They had become a united front, bound by the shared loss, the collective sacrifice, and the unwavering will to protect their world. The leaders of Earth, still reeling from the destruction, convened in secret. They knew the Empire would not be content with a single loss. Their pride had been wounded, and the desire for retribution burned within their ranks. The next phase of the war was inevitable, and it would be their final test. Earth had to prepare for the Empire's full wrath. The Galactic Empire, now on the brink of desperation, began to mobilize its most terrifying weapon, the final conqueror, a new fleet of warships designed for one purpose only: to annihilate Earth. The fleet was led by the Empire's most feared general, Commander Zorath, a ruthless tactician whose reputation for total destruction was unmatched. Under his command, the Empire's forces would attempt to obliterate Earth once and for all. As the fleet advanced, Earth's leaders scrambled to prepare for the worst. The Resistance had learned valuable lessons during the previous battles. The Helios cannon had been silenced, and the Oblivion cannon was destroyed, but Earth still had one final ace to play. The remnants of Earth's greatest minds, scientists, engineers, military strategists, had been working in secret, creating a weapon that would rival the Empire's greatest forces. The weapon was simple, yet brilliant. It was not a massive star killer like the Oblivion cannon. Instead, it was a device capable of harnessing Earth's own natural resources, energy, minerals, and human ingenuity to create an unprecedented offensive weapon. They had built a fleet of ships, each equipped with a new kind of technology, ships that could bend the laws of space itself, manipulating gravity to create weapons of unimaginable power. This was Earth's final stand, and it would be their greatest weapon against the Empire. As the final battle approached, Earth's forces gathered. The Resistance, now a well-organized military, prepared for what was certain to be a fight to the death. Every available soldier, technician, and scientist had been called upon to serve. The fate of humanity rested in their hands. The final conqueror. Fleet arrived in orbit, vast and imposing. Commander Zorath stood at the helm of his flagship, surveying the planet below. He had no doubt that Earth would fall. Their resistance had been impressive, but it was futile. The Empire's might was unrivaled, and this final battle would be their last. The destruction of Earth would send a message to the rest of the galaxy. No one could stand against the Galactic Empire. But Earth was not going to give up without a fight. As the fleet descended into Earth's atmosphere, the planet's final weapon was deployed. Ships powered by Earth's unique gravity-manipulating technology shot into space, locking onto the Empire's fleet. The Resistance had a plan. Draw the Empire's ships into Earth's atmosphere, where their advanced weapons would be neutralized by the planet's gravity fields. The battle erupted in space, with Earth's ships maneuvering expertly to avoid the Empire's devastating firepower. The final Conqueror fleet was vast, but Earth's forces, though smaller, fought with a fury that the Empire had never encountered before. The air crackled with energy as both sides unleashed everything they had. Explosions lit up the sky, bright, against the dark backdrop of space. Earth's ships, moving with agility and precision, launched gravity-based attacks, causing the Empire's vessels to plummet into the atmosphere, where they were torn apart by the planet's gravity. As the battle raged on, Commander Zorath grew desperate. His fleet was being systematically dismantled, and his forces were losing ground. The power of Earth's new technology was proving too much for the Empire to overcome. The Resistance's strategy had worked. Earth had turned the tables, and the tide of the battle was shifting. But the Empire was not one to surrender easily. Zorath, in a final act of desperation, activated the Death's Grasp, a weapon capable of collapsing entire sections of space itself, creating a black hole that would devour everything in its path. The weapon, though dangerous to all involved, was Zorath's final attempt to secure victory. If Earth could not be conquered, then it would be consumed. As the Death's Grasp activated, the fabric of space around it began to warp and twist. Earth's forces, already struggling to hold their ground, watched in horror as the black hole began to expand. It was only a matter of time before everything would be sucked into it. The destruction of Earth seemed imminent,